His Highness Elliot screams at Rachel, if you have even the slightest ounce of shame left in that black heart of yours, you will at least apologize to Margaret, he roars, and Margaret flinches behind him, terrified. Skies steps forward, his voice sharp as a knife. Witch! You were the one who stirred up all the other noble ladies to do such awful things. George's tone is colder, more measured. The wisest course now would be to admit your crimes honestly. Or will you not be satisfied until you drag the Ferguson name through the mud completely? Rachel lifts her chin, unwavering, and declares she has not the slightest intention of apologizing to His Highness's girlfriend. She admits to nothing. His Highness Elliot grits his teeth, fury flashing in his eyes. Why is she so damned impertinent? He mutters under his breath. Modest, never prone to outbursts, a paragon of a woman who would serve to make the man she stood beside shine brightest. By virtue of these qualities, she was selected to be the fiancée of the Crown Prince. However, the problem came from the prince's own unstable behavior. He had always hated how the adults in his life invariably treated him like a child, even more so when being compared to Rachel. The breaking point finally came when he received word that she had supposedly been bullying the girl he fawned over, Margaret. The Crown Prince declares it really was a waste of time to allow her the opportunity to express remorse for her crimes. He mocks her life is short and she should be sure to enjoy it to the fullest within the confines of the prison cell. To his surprise, a teasing smile curves her lips as she promises to take things slowly and enjoy a fun, leisurely life. She is then escorted by his knight Skies to the prison. Skies tells the warden that, under Prince Elliot's orders, she is to be locked in a dungeon, and her release will depend on how well she behaves and reflects on her actions. The warden, however, informs him that the cell is currently stacked with crates. He looks at them and asks, "What the heck is this?" The warden replies that a group of official-looking types came by today around noon. And they said they were going to store some things they did not need for a while. Skies asks why the hell are they letting nobles use the prison as storage. The warden replies it is just that they don't use the prison here much at all, so he figured it couldn't hurt. Skies glances at her and says they don't have a choice, this will have to do, and warns her not to complain about it being too narrow and crap. She should be thankful she isn't sharing herself with another criminal. The warden bets this is a damned eerie sight for a fancy girl from a posh family. He tells her it cannot compare to the high life of the capital, but a week or so should get her used to it, and tells her to just think of it as a rare stay in a dingy little inn. As she steps into the narrow prison, the warden remarks that she might be better off going back upstairs to make a scene in front of the others. He notes that the prison hasn't been used much lately and warns that they might completely forget she's down there. He adds that His Highness has probably already forgotten all about her and is enjoying himself with Miss Margaret. According to him, the best thing she can do now is beg for mercy while someone still remembers she is there. Skies laughs and agrees with the warden's assessment. She ignores them, methodically fastening chains on the cell. Skies blinks in shock and then snaps, "What is she doing?" She replies nothing in particular. She simply secured the cell further in the interest of her own safety, to consider such matters as only common sense, given that she is an unmarried woman after all. The warden looks taken aback, mumbling what should they do. Skies suggests for now they should report to His Highness. Later, His Highness Elliot watches her in absolute shock as she lounges on a mattress, reading a book. She pours herself some tea and sips it with a small, contented smile. His shock deepens until he finally snaps, "Where on earth did she get all this?" Rachel lets him know she prepared all this at her own expense, so naturally there won't be any burden placed on the palace treasury. Therefore, she doesn't believe there's any reason to be so upset. He hisses that is not what he meant. What he means is just where the hell did they all come from in the first place? She simply turns back to her things, ignoring him. "Seems like something is missing," she says, then smiles as she realizes what it is. The warden approaches His Highness and explains that the Duke Ferguson and his household not only anticipated this situation but also snuck a supply of provisions into the prison beforehand. Finally, Rachel addresses him directly. To be precise, this was all her doing, she says. She has always been preparing for an eventuality like this. Although no one would dispute the fact that Rachel Ferguson was a rare beauty, she was also known for an oftentimes air-like presence. It was not uncommon for people to completely forget about her presence, even if she was standing right beside them. Although she had an attractive and shapely figure, those thin lips of hers never expressed anything other than abstractions and subtleties. And she wasn't taken seriously by the young ladies she should have considered rivals. She's merely a pretty yet meek garnishing with the sole purpose of making the beautiful prince shine all the brighter. But was she to step away from the prince's shadow, she would wither away. That was how she was perceived. Even the prince himself thought so. But right now, in such a place, just who on earth was this stubborn girl doing something ridiculous before his very eyes? Meanwhile, at the Duke's household, her father demands of his man whether he is absolutely certain that Rachel's engagement to the prince was annulled at tonight's ball. The man replies that he is. Multiple sources present at the event have already confirmed it. Midway through the gathering, Prince Elliot declared his intention to cancel the engagement in front of everyone. The Duke's face darkens. The prince is finished, pulling such a reckless stunt in front of so many, with not a shred of respect for rank or title. This would never have happened under the king's watch. Anger rises as he recalls how flippantly that empty-headed buffoon annulled his daughter's engagement. Does he even have any idea of the calamity about to fall? The Duke's thoughts turn to his daughter and he mutters, he has awoken the demon from her slumber. Even without taking her parents' doting into account, Rachel had always been a beautiful girl, even as a child. Everyone who met her was left with the impression of a shy and gentle girl with a meek and fragile personality. His wife and he, who couldn't have known at the time, always praised her with smiles. Those who saw her smile back at them thought she was a wonderful and well-adjusted young lady. They couldn't be more wrong. The truth was, over time, her behavior eclipsed even the most rowdy of children. She would spend her days climbing trees to find beehives to throw at the boys who tried to pick on her. When the boys' older brothers came for revenge, she beat them over the head with a rolling pin. And then pushed the ringleader into a pond. Upon hearing the commotion, her mother and he came running over to find the boy on the verge of drowning as he couldn't escape the water. Because every time he came close to the water's edge, Rachel would throw stones at his head. When he hurried to stop her, she turned around and told him the following with a bright smile. Don't worry, so long as I throw enough stones fast enough every time he tries to come up to the surface, I can make sure he stays down there eventually. Perhaps. No. Certainly that was the moment he realized that there was a large chance his daughter was a psychopath. For the time being, he explained to her how difficult it would be to bury the boy under the water with stones. He gave her a brief explanation on how water resistance and the unpredictability of the stones on trajectories due to their shape would make it virtually impossible to do so. Her father still doesn't know why he suddenly started lecturing her on physics, but looking back, he must have been completely out of his mind with panic. Nevertheless, his daughter's eyes lit up and she exclaimed as expected of him. Usually he would be happy, but for the first time in his life, his daughter's praise flew in one ear and out the other. In order to teach her ethics and manners, they compared it to a sort of game. They instilled into her that these rules had to be followed so everyone could play the game of life fairly. But although they raised Rachel with an emphasis on all the necessary instructions for a young noble woman, they never expected her engagement to be annulled. And now Prince Elliot, the idiot prince, just flipped the whole damned game they had painstakingly built for her onto the floor. He then turns to his man and asks if there are any further developments. He admits the young Miss' expression barely changed when His Highness sentenced her to prison. She even allowed herself to be calmly led away without protest. He sinks onto the sofa in disbelief. The prince is done for, isn't he? The fact that Rachel hasn't yet reacted with anger means they still have some time. But there is not a chance that daughter of his will just let him get away with whatever he wants, will she? That reminds him George was supposed to be at that gathering as well, and demands just what on earth was he doing during all this. The man replies that is, just like His Highness, it seems he has become quite taken with that baron's daughter Margaret and gotten himself swept up in the proceedings. It seems he played an active part in condemning the young miss in front of everyone. The Duke mutters George is already dead. That fool, of all people, should know just what his sister is capable of when she goes on a rampage. When the hammer falls on him, he fears there's little he can do to protect him from his reckoning. Suddenly, the Duchess bursts in, crying out her daughter's name. He pulls her into an embrace and quietly says he knows he heard the news too and tries to calm her. The Duchess cries out that she is certain Rachel will not take this lying down, she might make murder everyone. Both His Highness's life and the future of their house could go up in smoke, but the Duke insists they have to believe their daughter. She is clever and well-educated young lady. He is sure she will exact her revenge in a way that doesn't involve anyone getting killed. Sophia enters the room and pardons her interruption. The Duke tells her it is excellent timing. He presumes she has heard of Rachel's situation. She bows and replies of course. The Duke announces he will be going to the palace immediately to lodge a formal protest and asks her if she can prepare some of Rachel's things and travel with him to give them to her in prison. He's also prepared to throw his name around in case he's refused. Sophie assures him there's no need to worry. He remarks, so she had already prepared. He would expect nothing less of her. She says yes, everything has been prepared and delivered already. Her lady was aware in advance that this incident would come to pass and as such prepared enough supplies and food to keep her comfortable for at least 3 months. She then had it all delivered to the royal palace. The Duke is shocked and blurts, "Wait, did Rachel know all of it in advance? And she didn't outright attack him? And 3 months worth of supplies for a single person? Just how on earth did she smuggle all of that into the royal palace?" Sophia calmly replies whilst there was indeed doubts these preparations would turn out to be necessary, nonetheless the lady did tell her when she first learned of the prince's plans to annul his engagement to her. Sophia reveals she also said, if that idiot breaks off his engagement to her, she will be free from her responsibilities. She can then go on a lovely and leisurely vacation, which she must say, sounds absolutely delightful. Once Rachel learned of the prince's plans to relieve her of her responsibilities, she gave orders for her dark night black cats to infiltrate all 4 corners of the royal palace. After that, the operation to smuggle in supplies and materials was a simple matter of faking official duties. Her fearful father wonders just what on earth is she planning. On the other hand, the prince's face twitches with fury. He didn't lock her up so she could play around like she's in some damned villa. He orders his men to hurry and confiscate everything she brought in. One of his men points out that she has locked the cell from the inside. The prince waves them off. They don't need a key, he says. They just need to break the chains. He commands them to round up some knights and bring the tools necessary to tear the chains apart. Then he turns to Rachel, smirking. Don't think this little evil trick of hers is going to get her anywhere. She will soon be enjoying that type of treatment she really deserves. Later Skies blurts out it's no good. The prince snaps as he telling him there's nothing he can do. He admits they even brought one of their iron saws, but not only did its teeth become worn out, it barely even left a scratch on the chains. The prince looks up at the sound of her giggling and screams at her, demanding whose fault she thinks the whole mess is in the first place. She tilts her head, adopting an innocent expression, and counters that it is His Highness's fault. After all, he was the one who put her in prison, wasn't he? That is the cause of all this. The prince's eyes narrow in anger. Seething with rage, the prince lashes out at Skies, ordering him to fetch a spear and stab it inside. Skies freezes, eyes wide in shock, and blurts what an alarm. The prince snaps that he doesn't mean to kill her, just enough to force her to unlock the cell. When Skies hesitates, the prince shouts at him to hurry. They only need to give her a little. He stops short when he notices Skies' pale face and the finger pointing behind him. Turning, the prince sees her standing there, weapon raised and aimed straight at him. Shocked, he blurts out, questioning how she managed to bring in a weapon. She smirks and says since Prince Elliot lacks both decorum and common sense whatsoever, she assumed that such a situation might arise, and then adds while he was busy chasing young girls around town, she often accompanied her father and uncle out on their hunts. Did he know that she became quite proficient at shooting wild game birds out of the sky? Also, about 3 years ago some bandits attacked a village they were staying at. Of course the soldiers in her father's retinue took care of most of them. However, she also had the opportunity to help out and took care of 3 of them herself. So what she's saying is, if she feels like she's in danger, she will have no hesitation when it comes to pulling the trigger. And he can take her words however he wishes. With that, she declares if he has no further business, she would like him to leave. Quickly, Skies drags His Highness up from the floor. At last, the prince spits out that she can spend as long as she likes in that cell of hers and rot down here for all he cares. No matter how much she begs or pleads, he will never let her out. They will see how she changes her tune then. She sighs and tells him to at least have the temerity to say that to her face, not while being dragged out the door. Outside, the prince orders his men not to send any meals down to Rachel at all. He will show her what it means to incur his wrath. He wonders how long Rachel's calm and composed facade will last once she runs out of food. He will conquer her rebellion through her stomach. Maybe she will learn some humility when her belly is empty. He also issues an operation to fuel Rachel's hunger by eating the meals meant for prisoners in front of her cell like it's the most delicious food in the world. Back in the dungeon, the warden remarks that he has to admit, the black bread they give nobles tastes a damn sight different. Even the grilled chicken breast is really good, though it's gone cold. The orange tart, he adds, is nice too, if a little too sour. He goes on about raisins and oatmeal with warm powdered milk, then roasted salmon and canned pickles with a creamy peach sauce. Rachel replies that the taste of her food is satisfactory, though one can expect only so much from preserved food. Then, with a faint smile, she declares herself envious of him. After all, he has the luxury of enjoying such a wonderfully cold meal. Well, that is a huge failure. Later that night, Skies informs the prince that she seems to have brought enough supplies to enjoy 3 full meals a day. The prince nearly jumps like a sulky child at the news, demanding to know how in hell she managed to stockpile so much food in her cell. His man exclaims it must be that mountain of crates. Skies agrees, remarking there must be an endless supply hidden in there. Fury sparks, and the prince lashes out, ordering them to leave her alone except for the occasional patrol. At this rate, going down there serves only as entertainment for her. His Highness then turns to George, her brother, and asks if he has managed to rein in Duke Ferguson. George thinks to himself that the question sounds unusually rational coming from the prince, before replying that they have already ensured no more supplies will be transported into the prison. Even if their father is lying, insisting he had nothing to do with helping her, George is determined nothing else will reach his sister. Elliot states that Rachel has only been able to amass these supplies because of the clout his family holds with various ministers and merchants. Once she realizes she has been abandoned to her fate by her family and turned into a public figure of hate, he is sure that even Rachel will lose the will to resist. The truth is, his family were already making plans to abandon young Master George to his fate. A few days later, Rachel calls out to the warden and says he hasn't beaten any of the jail food in front of her for 3 days. Has something happened? He replies that plan was cancelled. All it accomplished was making him look like an idiot for talking with her. She pulls out a fine wine and sighs that it's such a shame, since the moon is beautiful tonight and she had hoped they might dine together. He freezes at the sight, blurting that it's a 30-year-old Valentinus. She remarks, so he is familiar with it, but he snaps back bitterly that as if he could ever taste something like that, 1 bottle costs 2 months of his salary. She admits she simply found an unopened one in her father's cellar and offers it to him. He protests, saying there's no way he can accept such a gift, but she urges him to drink. He takes a careful sip and murmurs that this is the taste of a 30-year-old vintage. She brings out snacks to match, and soon the wine loosens his tongue. He praises the flavor, even suggesting another round, which makes her tease that he's being rather naughty. She adds that whiskey leaves a lovely warmth in the throat, and he laughs that she clearly knows her drinks, though she insists she's nothing compared to him. She then offers chocolates, and he smiles, confessing that talking like this makes him feel as though he's truly gotten to know her. She returns the smile, remarking that Prince Elliot only ever drones on about himself, leaving no room to reach him. He declares that the real bad apple is the prince, not her. When he notices how late it's grown, she gently reminds him to take care on his way back and not drop his whiskey. He promises he won't and asks her to keep their little evening a secret. She agrees, only requesting that he deliver her letters and turn a blind eye to any visitors she might have. He accepts without a moment's hesitation. The next day, during his walk, Prince Elliot notices a man who clearly isn't one of the palace attendants. At first glance he seems out of place, and when Elliot looks closer, he recognizes him as a waiter from a restaurant in the capital's downtown district. What is he doing inside the palace? The thought barely forms before Elliot's eyes widen and a sharp gasp escapes him. Damn Rachel, she is even having food delivered. Didn't he specifically order that no one is supposed to be sending food to herself? Rachel replies that she has heard all about how he refuses to feed his prisoner, but he never once mentioned anything about her ordering food for herself. He snaps back that deliveries are banned. Later, she suspects all her orders are being stopped at the gate, yet His Highness has missed the most crucial point, hasn't he? All he did was forbid deliveries and then leave it at that, never even bothering to investigate how she was sending her requests out. Her thoughts wander back to that meal. It was truly delicious and she craves the taste of freshly cooked meat again. Then an idea sparks, and she muses that gathering things for oneself is essential to a true slow life. On the other hand, the Archduke's man remarks His Highness Prince Elliot may be in some trouble. The only way he could get away with such behavior is because His Majesty the King is away for a period of time. To think that the prince would do something so reckless even though His Majesty left him the running of the castle. How could he do such a thing without seeking out His Majesty's permission first? But then something catches his attention and he tells the Archduke and adds that this is a rather unusual path for an afternoon walk. The Archduke, however, gestures ahead and replies that there is indeed a beautiful landscape garden unfolding before them. It is quite large, its plumage exquisite to behold, and he has even named it Enrique, sneaking back now and then to admire it in secret. He remarks that this garden feels far more natural than those in the country yard, alive with many more wild birds. Pointing across the pond, he shows his latest favorite, a duck perched on the bank, which he has grown fond of watching. But before his very eyes, an arrow strikes the bird, and it collapses. A rope tied to the shaft jerks taut, and Rachel drags the duck through the cell window with practiced ease. An excellent catch, she says brightly. This will make a fine dinner. The Archduke and his man both glance in through the cell door, stunned, demanding what on earth she is doing. She turns to them with an innocent blink, asking if they are talking to her. Just then, the prince storms into the dungeon, furious, demanding why on earth she has a fire burning in her cell. She replies flatly that she can control the heat, so smoke inhalation won't be a problem. He seizes the bars of her cell, voice rising as he shouts that isn't the issue. Why did she tell his great-uncle she had to hunt her own food because he refused to feed her? She admits without hesitation that she did. His temper flares, and he yells that if she would stop acting so selfishly, maybe he'd actually give her something to eat. He thinks this is the most that he, Elliot, will ever concede. This definitely isn't an expression of pity or sympathy for this evil woman at all. It is just his great-uncle came crying to him with tears running down his beard in public. He just cannot bear to have that happen again, can he? There was just no other way around this. Rachel tells him he can keep his food to himself. Since she cannot be sure about just what he might put in those meals, she doesn't want them. Later, she closes her book and notices how unnervingly quiet it has become. Lately, the only people who have been coming down here are patrolling guards. Even His Highness hasn't been spoiling for a fight recently. She hasn't seen him around at all. It is a little embarrassing to admit, but things are a touch boring today. She has already burned through all the books she bought with her as well. But then a thought brightens her expression. If there's nothing left to read, she might as well write her own. Fortunately, she has got a great subject and plenty of time right now. She decides the main character will be a prince of a small kingdom, Prince Belmont. An idiot with an empty head who chases after anything that catches his eyes just like a dog, and he's always hoisted by his own petard and made a fool out of, a man who cannot help but run after girls all day long. A few weeks later, Sophia comes to visit, having rushed over at once. Rachel's message had said there was an emergency. Still, she wonders why Rachel needed her to bring so many things. Rachel eyes the bundles and remarks that they aren't from the mansion. Sophia confirms with a shake of her head, explaining that she purchased them in the capital, where the sellers have no idea of their customers' true identity. She adds that certain publishers in the capital are known for their discretion about who places orders with them. Rachel nods, satisfied, and tells her she wants these works distributed throughout the city. Sophia is to take them for now, keep the price low, and make sure they are sold in every bookstore in town. That's the only way to make sure they can't be pulled out by the roots, Rachel insists. She has already completed her first series of 3 books, The Stupid Prince's Grand Tour, along with 2 companion volumes that serve as spin-offs. His Highness is aiming for my. Admittedly, she did draw on some real-life experiences of her to embellish the rich tapestry she has woven to detail Prince Belmont's outrageous behavior. Since she has included the tagline of this as a work of fiction, there shouldn't be any issues. The spin-off series is about a young knight called Hank who was raised up from the peasantry by the prince's unexpected offer of assistance. However, the twist is that the prince secretly holds feelings for Hank, so it is sort of a comedy. Since the literacy rate in the kingdom has increased, novels have become exceptionally popular. The people will read anything so long as it keeps their interest. Sophia calls out to her, saying she has found a couple of issues. In the chapter My Lord and I, there are many times when Elliot is taking skies from behind that use the lines "ah" and he has been sullied. Sophia warns if she uses them 3 times each, won't the reader get tired of seeing them? What's more, and this is only her personal opinion, but she believes that Sky should be on top, not that good-for-nothing prince. Rachel gives her a deadpan look, saying she never asked her to start editing but she can make any changes now she is on it. Sophia understands the terms and conditions Rachel wishes to publish this work under and also assures her they have no paper trail that can be followed to the printing house, so she should rest assured the source's privacy will be respected. And they will make sure that the books are distributed in such a way that no one's involvement will be known. The next morning the publisher points out that in the first series of books, the main characters are Prince Belmont and his loyal knight Hank. However, when presumably the same characters appear in the next series, they are called Prince Elliot and Skies. He guesses maybe the author mixed up the names as they were writing, or were in fact perhaps the names of the model these characters were based on. Sophia, knowing it was on purpose, replies perhaps they simply felt that Elliot was a more suitable name. Commoners, such as those who work for publishing houses, were more concerned with putting food on the table than of the names of royals who may as well have lived in another world for them. On the other hand, Elliot asks Skies what's wrong. It is not like him to keep his distance. He blurts it is nothing, looking pale. Surprisingly, Skies also likes to read novels. Elliot watches him with a narrowed gaze, but shifts the conversation, saying they cannot just let Rachel do whatever she pleases. Things are even worse than before. He admits earlier he went to check on the situation down in the prison for the first time in a few days. That cell has turned into quite the high classroom somehow. The prince then turns to George and reminds him, didn't he tell him to make sure to keep Duke Ferguson in line? So just why is the prison looking more and more like a fine hotel? George replies well the thing is, no matter how hard he looked, there was no evidence that supplies were being sent from their home. He couldn't find anything strange or anyone doing suspicious things at all. Skies asks what about the warden down in the prison? Has he been shirking his duty? George replies he has multiple jobs around the castle, so he only checks in on the prison as part of his patrol. When he asked him about the things that had been moved in lately, he seemed just as surprised. The prince drives his fist into the table, spitting curses at that damn Rachel. Elliot snaps, wouldn't a well-raised noble lady typically be beaten into submission with just the mere threat of jail time? She should have begged him for a reprieve with tears in her eyes after just a few days. He mutters just where the hell did that meek girl who would shut up and follow him whenever he went disappear? One of the men remarks that she has certainly changed a lot, hasn't she? He even goes so far as to suggest she might be a substitute for the real one His Highness killed at the ball or something along those lines. The prince snaps why the hell he would have called this meeting if that were the case, calling them all idiots. The man then guesses that maybe the person rotting in the cell is just a body double and the real one has already slipped away. The prince says then this imposter is doing a really bad job since his personality has completely changed. Then, with a blush, the knight adds that, putting aside whether or not she is real, Rachel has become well, kind of sexy, hasn't she? The other knights murmur their agreement, making Elliot flinch. One knight remarks that it's those subtle gestures of hers that are so alluring. Another adds that she has also become strangely expressive lately. Back then, she was like a rough sketch but now she's a vivid masterpiece. Elliot nods before he realizes it, unwillingly agreeing. Wolinski then chimes in, what's more, doesn't she have a great body shape? He explains that when a lady goes out in public, she almost always wears a corset, and Miss Rachel was no exception. But now, she treats her prison cell like her private room, wearing clothes she would never dare wear outside. Simply put, the corset is gone. In other words, this is Rachel's natural body, no makeup, no tightened waist, no forced posture. Her raw beauty spills out, unleashing that bombastic body and curvy, hourglass figure. George suddenly blurts out, are all of them seriously going to abandon Miss Margaret just because his sister has a hot body? Elliot mutters that is another matter entirely. He has no intention of switching away from his adoration of Margaret simply over a difference in body type. How should he put it? Her appeal is more in the mind, rather she is a healing presence. He tries to explain, though the words come out tangled, as if even he doesn't fully know why he likes her. Eventually, he declares that of course Miss Margaret, whom he so claims to hold in the highest adoration, cannot possibly measure up to George's sister in terms of the ideal figure. But that, he insists, is perfectly fine. More than fine. After all, so many young ladies do everything within their power to achieve their ideal of beauty. They cake themselves with makeup, contour their bodies to fit ill-fitting dresses and add all manner of deceitful accessories. So what he's really saying is, shouldn't Margaret be accepted just the way she is? A body shaped not by luxury but by her past as a commoner. Even clothed, her neckline and collarbone press into view. Her chest may be small, but not invisible. Her hands and feet are thin, some would generously call them petite. Skies mutters, isn't he just insulting her? George tells him to shut up. But then Wolinski smirks and tells them to guess what is the most important point that Miss Rachel and Miss Margaret have in common. A noble young lady from a prestigious family, she was a natural choice as the prince's betrothed. Although she doesn't cover herself in glitz and glamour, she has an outstanding figure and is a true beauty. And a girl of common birth who one day found herself evaluated to the ranks of the nobility. Despite not being quite as developed with a charming and bubbly sense of naivety about her, she's still very cute. As the men find themselves thinking hard, Wolinski suddenly exclaims both of them are natural. Even if they stripped them of everything, nothing about their natural figures would change. He declares a naturally beautiful body bestowed by the gods is not something to be tightened with corsets or covered by makeup. So what he wants to say is, a woman's beauty lies in the natural. Everyone agrees with them. Eloit finds himself thinking, just what did he call this meeting for in the first place again? The warden states that people who aren't involved don't just waltz in here. Margaret plants her hands on her hips and says she knows that and now he should pass along that Margaret Poisson has come to see Rachel. The warden stares, deadpan, convinced she hasn't heard a word he said. Grabbing the bars, Margaret shouts it's her. The warden wonders who is this girl. He doesn't know what she's saying, but the missy in the cell really isn't the type to get up early. He decides no matter what happens, it's definitely not his fault. Rachel sits up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, but the drowsiness vanishes the moment she spots Margaret, who remarks that she's finally awake and really is a sleepyhead. The warden, watching, wonders if the two are friends, but before the thought settles, Rachel drives her knee into Margaret's stomach, knocking her back, then offers a mocking apology, claiming her tummy just looked too delectable to resist, which makes Margaret screech in outrage, demanding what that even means, to which Rachel calmly insists it's the truth, that she felt amazingly tender, and that something about her just begs for a cheek tug, a slap on the back, or even a few good whacks, confessing that she has spent the past 10 years resisting the urge to raise her hand against anyone but couldn't hold back when she saw Margaret, so the knee would have to do. Fuming, Margaret snaps, demanding what is going on and what kind of noble lady greets someone like that, insisting that not even the pros in the slums are that crazy, but Rachel only smiles and replies that the more she looks, the more eye-catching Margaret becomes, that no one else can match her talent, because she is a peerless punching bag. Margaret fires back, asking what sort of talent a punching bag could possibly have, and Rachel, with her big pleading, begs her to allow 10 roundhouse smacks to the face, but then she suddenly pauses, tilts her head, and asks if perhaps they've met before, which makes Margaret's temper spike further as she yanks the warden down by his tie and demands to know what is wrong with this woman. What does she even mean? Is she claiming not to know her? And though the warden mutters he has no idea either, Margaret starts to say all that aside, only to realize with mounting outrage that she can't how absurd it is that Rachel greeted her with a gut punt if she truly thought this was their first meeting, and with tears welling in her eyes, she whips back toward Rachel, pointing a trembling accusatory finger and shouting that she doesn't know if Rachel is really forgetting her or if she's just bluffing. Margaret declares at this rate, things are looking grim for her and warns Rachel not to take her lightly and declares that she will truly become Prince Elliot's queen, that this is what she came to say, and that Rachel had better not regret it when it's too late. With that, she storms off, leaving Rachel to glance at the warden and ask just who that girl was, and the warden replies that since she mentioned becoming a queen, he supposes she's with the prince, though Rachel could have sworn she'd seen that face before and the name rings familiar too, even if, more than anything, she just wanted to give her a good smack. Somehow, she can feel something nostalgic burning up inside of her. She snaps out of her thoughts when the warden remarks, doesn't she think she's aiming for a real big fish there? She counters he thinks so. It wasn't such a big deal when she nearly drowned him in the pond back then. The warden asks in shock, is she talking the crown prince? Even though his daughter is currently squared away in prison, the work of one Duke Ferguson continues as busily as ever. Typically, if a member of a noble family were to be indicted of a crime, the rest of their family would need to keep a low profile, only daring to help their accused relative through discreet means. In this case however, the punishment was an arbitrary jailing by the crown prince with no basis in law, so there was absolutely no reason why the Duke's family should sit back and meekly accept such a charge. Since the king, who was still away, had yet to make any formal charges against his daughter, the Duke was doing everything in his power to fight against the false accusation leveled at his daughter. Although his son and heir George may have been taken in by the other side, Dan was still the head of the family and he refused to back down no matter what threats his son made. Sophia approaches the Duke and says it has to do with the lady, prompting him to ask how she is, to which she replies that she is doing just fine, but the Duke, unsatisfied, says that is far too short for a summary and there must be more she can tell him. Sophia then instructs Lisa to hand the Lord the daily observation log from the watchman and orders another maid to summon the attending physician at once, only for the maid to ask whether she should call the older doctor who specializes in cardiothoracic surgery or the younger one who studies psychosomatic medicine, which makes Sophia snap at her for asking such a foolish question, reminding her he said he wishes to read the daily activity reports on the lady and tells her to use common sense and summon both doctors, though in the end he sighs that if Sophia insists Rachel is doing fine, then it is all right, as he cannot afford to collapse beneath an avalanche of reports at the moment, and the thought reminds him that it should be nearly time for His Majesty to return from the inspection tour, which means His Highness has likely already begun laying out a case against Rachel for when His Majesty arrives, and so they must begin preparing their own defense as well. But to his shock, Sophia informs him the Majesty won't be returning for some time. She then says Rachel marrying into the royal family through Prince Elliot was decided in no small part due to Her Majesty's insistence. With this in hand, they have created an extensive report about everything that has happened from the engagement's dissolution to the present. Then they had it covertly relayed to His Majesty and the Queen whilst they were on their inspection tour through a messenger from House Newman. With the report, they also included a message saying the cats are at play. Since receiving the missive, the royal procession has stopped at the hot springs in Count Frecker territory. It doesn't seem like they will be returning to the capital anytime soon. But perhaps it is likely that they are delaying their return out of fear of being caught up in Rachel blowing off her steam. The Duke sighs, that cannot be possible. No matter just how angry Rachel may be, it would be insane to suggest that even His Majesty would delay his return purely out of worry he would become collateral damage. Sophia begins to confess something about the Archduke, only to catch herself mid-sentence and insists she shouldn't say more. Which only makes the Duke press her, demanding to know why she mentioned the Archduke and what has happened to him. She assures him it has already been settled and he should rest easy, but he argues that such words only deepen his worry, and noticing the strain in his face, she remarks that he has been clearly under great stress of late and suggests that he and the maiden take some time away to visit the hot springs, leaving him stunned as he asks in disbelief if she means at a time like this. She replies yes, because during the visit to the hot springs it might just so happen that he will meet with the royal procession. The Duke realizes that she means they should discuss the current situation with their majesties over there. She presses a finger to her lip, whispering the fact that the royal procession has happened to have a delay in their schedule at the moment in time is all just a coincidence. If he so happens to depart for the hot springs at this time with the madam, then when he meets with their majesties, it would simply be a chance encounter. The Duke then asks about the situation at home, pointing out that if he is gone, then by all rights George would have the run of the house, but Sophia calmly replies that on the contrary, with his lord absent, there are certain conveniences to be gained, which makes the Duke demand, such as what? She says if he and the madam are away for only a short jaunt, it would certainly not be unusual to assign a substitute to run the affairs of the house in his stead. And since the young master is still too young to be trusted with the handling of such a responsibility, that naturally someone else should be appointed to act in his stead. Outside, as Jonathan approaches with a stack of papers, he flinches at the sound of his name spoken in lowered voices, hearing them suggest that if he were entrusted with the full authority to manage the household, matters could be kept in order. The Duke agrees, affirming that Jonathan is his man, that he would not deviate from the current policy and that George would be unable to do as he pleases. Then adds that Sophia need not worry, for Jonathan will remain by his side, and if George dares raise a fuss, she should simply have his nanny drag him back to his room. Jonathan's face turns pale. The Duke rushes over to his wife, blurting that they should head for a hot spring vacation right away, but she narrows her eyes at him and asks what on earth has gotten into him, pointing out this is the worst possible time, yet he insists they are going no matter what. At the same time, Sophia turns to Jonathan and says she'll be meeting with Rachel, tells him to spread word through the household about the new state of affairs, and adds before leaving that she'll also be out on a business trip, so they shouldn't expect her back anytime soon. It was at that point that Jonathan decided that perhaps it would be best to stop mulling over the little details when it comes to the young lady of the house. At the market, Sophia asks if everything is ready, and the man assures her that all she requested will be delivered to the lady. When a palace guard demands to know which station the goods are meant for, he explains that a shipment of cat food has just arrived, and the guards wave them through, but Sophia eyes them and asks where the others are, to which they reply that most are out on night patrol and there won't be another sweep near the prison for at least 3 hours. Once inside, Rachel swiftly pulls out her key to open the cell, only for Sophia to remark that if she wishes to unlock it, she could simply use the duplicate key instead. But Rachel counters if she doesn't keep her skin polished up, they will start to rust. Sophia warns her if she uses criminal means to open the cell, it could leave a trail, and asks what would she do if she accidentally broke the lock. Stepping out, she stretches her arms and says it feels like it has been such a long time since she has breathed free air. Sophia flatly says there's no difference between the air just on the other side of those bars and the air she's breathing now. Sophia tells her they don't have much time and urges her to sit down, then calmly begins brushing Rachel's hair as she mentions having heard that a wonderful young lady visited earlier. Rachel remarks that news travels fast before asking if Sophia happens to know who she is, but Sophia only replies that rather than asking her, Rachel should be asking herself how could she not remember her. When Rachel demands what she means, Sophia answers plainly that the girl was none other than Miss Margaret Poisson, the lady who stole that idiot Prince Elliot from her. Recognition flickers across Rachel's face and she says, "Oh, from the party." She thinks she remembers her, or at least someone like her. Sophia remarks that she has suspected it for a while now, but Rachel really does seem to have selective memory, doesn't she? And when Rachel rolls the name Margaret around in her head, she suddenly brightens with a smile and says that Miss Punching Bag sounds like a much better name for her. Sophia pull out a set of boxy tickets for the Royal Theatre and inform her that tonight's performance will be The Prince and the Pauper, adding that since the young master will be at home today and tomorrow, she has arranged for Rachel to stay in a suite at the fresh verdant hall with twin beds and a spacious living room, and that Maya, the maid, will be stationed at a nearby inn to assist her whenever she wishes to return to the prison. Rachel's expression lights up, exclaiming that it feels like ages since she last saw Alexandra, and she realizes with a start that it truly has been over a year since Alexandra left with her father on business. Sophia informs her they have received a message from her saying just how much she wanted to meet her, as well as her eagerness to hear all the stories she must have about what's going on. Rachel tugs at her hem and asks if the dress size is right, then points out with a grin that the extra space around the chest might get annoying as Sophia is fairly well off in that department, but she has no right to complain, teasing that Miss Punching Bag would probably haunt her if she overheard. Sophia only mutters that girl is more annoyingly lively than any of them, and as they both change clothes, Rachel adds that since she has been staying up all night lately, she can simply keep to a different sleep schedule and no one will suspect a thing if she spends the day in bed without talking to anyone. The only nuisance might be His Highness and his group dropping in from time to time, but surely that won't be a problem for her, right? Sophia smiles faintly and says that with makeup applied, their appearances are almost identical, and in the shadows of a dungeon, it would be nearly impossible to tell them apart. Before leaving, Sophia tells her to enjoy her pajama party and Rachel grins, promising she will, even if His Highness and George end up as the unfortunate centerpieces of the conversation. At the fresh verdant hall, she greets Alexandra with an exuberant long time no see, to which Alexandra replies she could say the same before demanding to know, without delay, everything that has been happening, confessing she has been dying for the details, and a few days later, the scene shifts to the prince. Red-faced as he tells Margaret she is beautiful, Wolinski chiming in that she truly is, and the prince eagerly agreeing that yes, she is without doubt the cutest. Wolinski declares that yes, a sleeveless tube-top dress is truly a marvel to behold, admitting he had worried he went too far with the design, but that abandoning frills and ribbons for something more adult-like turned out brilliantly. The prince remarks that Wolinski certainly has a unique perspective, but Wolinski considers himself rather orthodox. Then proudly adds that as a member of the Kingdom's Association of Flat Lists he is nominating Miss Margaret for Flat of the Year, which makes the prince mutter that perhaps he shouldn't be saying such things, only for Wolinski to look offended and demand what the prince means, declaring that as flat lists they embrace every degree of meagerness, and quibbling over the fine line between sheer cliffs and cutting boards does no good at all. Without learning to both appreciate and distinguish between them, the prince will remain a second-class flat list forever. The prince, exasperated, Asks how he can speak so eloquently yet make so little sense when he's meant to come from the esteemed Wazowski family, and Wolinski curtly corrects him, it is Wolinski. Suddenly Margaret throws herself into the prince's arms and exclaims thank you so much for getting her this. He gives her a shy smile and tells her to think nothing of it. He's just happy to see her dress up so beautifully. Suddenly, she declares. Then she's going to go and brag about this to Rachel. But Elliot says she doesn't need to bother herself to go and show her something like that. But Margaret insists that Rachel is holding a party tonight. She wants to go there and show off this dress so everyone knows who the star of the party that's really loved by him is. His smile wavers. Later, he hurries down to the dungeon, only to stop short, stunned by the crowd gathered inside. He strides toward the warden who, of all things, is serving drinks and his face hardens with fury. The warden mutters, Your Highness, but he cuts him off with a snap, telling him not to Your Highness him. The warden merely offers a drink with a cheerful grin, explaining that he's in charge of pouring the wine. He's already tried a taste of Sting, and can confidently recommend both the red and white. The rose, he adds, is being saved for later since there's only a single cask. The prince, baffled, says that's not the point, his duty is to guard the dungeon. So why the hell didn't he stop this circus? The warden shrugs, saying there's little he can do when a flood of big fish shows up at once. The prince snaps back that it's still his job to stop them. The warden calmly explains they all flashed their invitations and walked right past, most of them talking in odd voices too. The prince finally turns to Rachel, locked in her cell, and demands an explanation. She smirks and says it simply occurred to her that she'd never hosted a housewarming party. Though, she adds slyly, perhaps she should also be thinking of what comes next. He stares at her, exasperated, asking if she's forgotten why she's even here. Rachel breezily replies out of consideration for the fact that some nobles and statesmen might not appreciate seeing his royal face in such a setting, she chose not to invite them. Instead, tonight's guest list is restricted to moral dignitaries, clergymen, and merchants. The prince asks what kind of half-hearted consideration is that? His gaze wanders, and she is right. Every single person in here looks like a priest, a merchant, or a foreign ambassador of some sort. There is an awful lot of influence in this one room. No wonder the warden was powerless to stop them. Suddenly, a cardinal shouts, "Yay, prison!" The prince whirls on him, furious. What the hell is supposed to be, yay, about prison? George rushes to intervene, hissing that he can't afford to pick a fight with a cardinal. The prince snaps that he can't even air his complaints to Rachel with this circus of people watching. George tries to calm him, promising stern letters will be sent demanding explanations, but with this many guests, good luck identifying anyone. Just then, Margaret bursts in, calling Elliot's name. She vows to set them all straight because, honestly, isn't this insane? Prince Elliot is a hero of justice, and there's no way Rachel could have fooled everyone. In a surge of righteousness, she climbs on top of a table and shouts, "Everyone, listen." She doesn't know why they are here, but Rachel is the villain. Prince Elliot was so brave he sentenced his own fiancée to prison to protect her so they shouldn't let her trick them. Silence follows. Then, as one, the entire crowd erupts into laughter. Margaret beams and spins to Elliot. "See? She did it." Elliot mutters under his breath, "Yeah, she sure did." Margaret immediately helps herself to a piece of meat, exclaiming how delicious it is. George watches her with a weary sigh, relieved she's happy, though he wonders, where's Skies? Before he can dwell on it, a guest leans over and casually points out that the knightly fellow has been enjoying himself from the moment he arrived. Alexandra sits outside the bars with a smirk. Rachel thanks her, admitting she really helped her out. She smiles and says when it comes to foreigners, she can feel free to leave it all to her. It's the absolute least she can do, after all. Rachel supposes it is simply to be expected that the daughter of the Minister, Foreign Affairs, would be well connected abroad. But really, giving His Highness a good one was certainly quite amusing. If she had known of the fun she was missing out on, she definitely would have come back sooner. But Rachel wonders if she has been giving him a few too many good ones as of late. If his stress builds up too much and he explodes prematurely, it could end up being a real headache. Alexandra asks. If that happens, what will she do? Will she let him off the hook? But she sighs and says no, she will just have to crush him before he has the chance to explore. Alexandra points out she really is quite relaxed about this whole affair, isn't she? Rachel admits it certainly will be a chore, but she supposes she will have to make sure to grind His Highness to dust before he finally loses whatever little sense he has left and does something truly reckless. George, on the other hand, scowls and suddenly yanks the bag out of Jonathan's hands. Their plan to drive that worthless elder sister of his into a corner isn't going as well as he would like. They can get away with teasing her a little bit, but if they do something too reckless and put her in danger, they risk losing legitimacy. They have to look for a way to break Rachel's spirit that doesn't cross the line and get them condemned. But just how do they do it? To make matters worse, all the courtiers in the palace cannot be relied on. They are doing their best to stay out of this. They won't probably cooperate with them until the king hands down his own verdict. The most they will do is alert the knights if any spies try to infiltrate the palace, but there is no way that his elder sister could have organized such a huge party involving foreign dignitaries without some sort of illicit communication with the outside world. But somehow none of their patrols have reported any suspicious persons at all. He has been doing everything he can to stop his father from sending her any help, but it is hard to say how effective that has been. From what he has seen, nothing suspicious has been happening at home. But he is certain that Rachel has been receiving supplies from here, one way or another. What's more, no one has been openly defying him, but for some reason it feels like the servants at home are working against him. He grumbles what a mess. All he wants to do is bask in Margaret's radiance, but he cannot get a handle on the enemies they're against. His gaze drifts to the wall, landing on a portrait of a scantily clad woman, with diaries, novels, and fan letters scattered beneath it. He freaks out thinking, what is this? Why are they here? He's sure that he made certain to hide all this stuff so that the maids wouldn't see it when they cleaned. George flinches when his eyes fall on a letter lying across the table, a strange chill prickling down his spine as he reaches for it. The moment he reads the contents, his face drains of color. Later, he can hardly stop himself from stammering apologies, blurting that Margaret claimed she was being bullied, but he should never have accused Rachel so blindly. He's terribly sorry, he pleads, begging her not to expose whatever was written in that letter. Rachel only smirks, feigning ignorance as she tilts her head, remarking just whatever is the heir to a dukedom doing growling on the floor. And he mentioned the letter contents. Just what does he mean? Perhaps he's talking about the time she had to wash his pants that one September, even when he's 5 and wet the bed. Or that time in February when he was 7 and he was so terrified of the fireworks he wet himself. But she supposes that it only covers the episodes that could be considered charming, doesn't it? Her smile widens as she tells him that if it isn't about that particular occasion, then perhaps he really means the spring in May when he was 11, first becoming aware of the opposite gender and rubbed himself on his big sister's dresses in the old closet when he thought no one was looking. Or perhaps it was June, when at 15 he slipped into her room, believing it empty, and sniffed her sheets. She continues that if it isn't that, then perhaps it was July, when he was 17, just last year, stealing his sister's underwear from the laundry and hiding it in his room like a personal trophy. Before she can go on, he drops to his knees, bowing low and spilling apologies one after another. She only coos that there's no need for him to be so frightened, her smile edged with mockery, before adding that his big sister simply doesn't know when His Highness might order her execution. So, as she was thinking about the past, she decided to write it all down in a letter. Since those moments were so nostalgic, so lovely, she thought it only right to share them with her dear little brother. After all, she remarks, he's at that age now. If he falls for a wonderful girl like Margaret, surely he'll forget all those tender memories of what he did with and to his big sister. She adds that she doesn't know if she'll ever leave this prison alive, but she'll be at peace so long as her precious little brother can carry on without her, since he clearly doesn't need his sister anymore. She also adds that even if her body returns to the earth, she will be happy so long as she knows she can live on in her brother's heart for all time. Reminding him that he's completely head over heels for Margaret now, she adds he doesn't have any space in his heart for his big sister. Holding up a small book, she tells him she has written down all those fond memories and suggests they should be given to their mother and father. His expression turns ashen as she says that in this way, his big sister will be able to watch over him from heaven with perfect peace of mind. Once again, he falls into frantic pleas, begging her not to let their parents know. She tilts her head, asking how she could possibly watch over him then. When he calls her older sister, she pouts, saying that George, who used to call her Sissy back in the day, was much cuter. At once, he switches, stammering Sissy, as he promises that he'll make sure His Highness never lays a hand on her. But she only blinks innocently and reminds him that she had told him she did all sorts of things to Margaret. She doesn't really remember what, but surely they must have been awful acts. He bursts out that it is absolutely not true. Margaret really did get some of her things broken. She also really did get pushed down the stairs. Up until now George was certain that his elder sister was behind it, but now he knows that it cannot be true at all because a person who could orchestrate such an intricate extortion against her own little brother from the confines of a prison cell, if she really wanted to take down a rival, things would have escalated far past simple bullying. He blurts that he's certain she never did anything to Margaret at all and swears he'll even put it in writing as a formal pledge. She arches a brow, asking if that's so, then wonders aloud if their father and mother are the only ones he doesn't want her to tell or if there's someone else. With offhand ease, she adds the handmaids, His Highness and Margaret to the list. When she promises to respect his choices, he bursts out with gratitude, thanking her profusely only for her to add that in truth, she feels a little relieved, since she's already heard every word, she would be at a loss if he also said that he didn't want her to know. His body stiffens, he turns slowly, dread creeping over him and finds Alexandra standing there with a knowing smirk. She greets him, remarking that it's been some time, already over a year since she left with her father on diplomatic tours. Yet in just that year, her childhood friend and fiancé has forgotten all about her and even cast her aside. She asks if he remembers how long it has been, or if he can no longer even recall her face, if perhaps, to him, this is their first true meeting. He screeches, stumbling back in panic, noticing his reaction. She remarks no matter how kind a girl may be, any lady would take offense at being treated like some monster rising from the dark. Rachel, meanwhile, only smiles, remarking that those colorful, nostalgic memories from George's past are best entrusted to the care of his partner for life Alexandra. And then she muses to herself, wouldn't it be terribly unfinished if she only tore off one wing? George sits on a bench in the garden when Skies strolls over. He says he was starting to worry, since George hasn't been seen much with them or with His Highness lately, and wonders if something's wrong. Then come the questions, whether George is eating properly, sleeping enough. George only says he might be a little tired. Skies brightens and says that calls for a good steak. Nothing lifts a weary spirit like red meat. With 500 steaks in him, George would be good as new. George sighs and says that isn't the real problem. Alexandra has suddenly returned home from abroad. Following that, she claimed that she had to reshape him into a man deserving of her, so he has been besieged with an ungodly amount of prescribed study material with a particular emphasis on foreign affairs courtesy of her. He feels like if he were to go back for another lesson, his head is going to burst. Skies still insists steak is the answer. George says he thinks he's the only one who would come up with a solution like that. Skies shifts the topic to Alexandra, noting it's been a year since her trip with her father, then teases if George kissed her the moment they met again. George mutters it wasn't that kind of situation at all, and admits ever since that night, he hasn't had more than a few rare moments of freedom, let alone the time to show himself to His Highness. Skies smiles and suggests making sure to get along with Alexandra and leave escorting Margaret to him, claiming Margaret is a higher and noble existence than some mere fiancé. George retorts he may say that, but isn't he pretty much in the same position as him? Asking him if Martina knows about how he has been following Margaret's every step as well. He reminds him Martina really does love him deeply. It's quite a bit different compared to the likes of the political arrangements between himself and Alexandra or His Highness and Rachel. With a pointed glance, George adds that it's not as if he'll ever marry Margaret because of His Highness, but wouldn't it end badly if Martina found out just how infatuated he is with her? Skies looks like his brain has stopped processing, so George mutters an apology, saying he shouldn't have brought up Martina. Meanwhile, Margaret kneels in the church, whispering that she has come this far, so why must there always be yet another obstacle? Hasn't she done enough, even after finally winning her prince? She admits the prince is utterly in love with her, yet what if that woman refuses to yield before the king returns? What if the annulment is overturned? She tells God she has done her part, so can he not simply do his? Her prayers unravel into mutters, words spilling one after another, about how hard she fought to reach this point. The men may have been easy, but the torment from the girls was merciless. She fumes over those haughty noble daughters, sneering at the way they treat their fiancés like strangers just because the marriages were arranged. If they dismiss their own men as if they weren't men at all, of course the first kind word from another girl will steal their hearts. Why blame her when the fault is theirs? Why bully her, when they should look in a mirror and ask why their men stray so easily? Bitterly, she calls them pigs, scoffing that even the lowest streetwalker in the slums knows how to keep her regulars satisfied. If those noble ladies are so superior, why don't they try keeping a man themselves? She tells herself she will bag Prince Elliot and then look down on all of them. After all, Mama rose from the slums to a baroness simply by choosing her customers well, and Margaret declares that as her daughter, inheriting both Mama's beauty and cunning, she will rise higher still, leaping straight from baroness's child to princess in one go. Her lashes flutter in an innocent blink, her thoughts drifting. If she cannot deal with Rachel, how can she ever secure a rosy future with Prince Elliot? For some reason, Rachel doesn't seem to be in love with Prince Elliot at all, but he's so cool, so just why does she have that attitude towards him? But then she thinks if one grew up having a cool brother like George, one would simply get used to it. But still for her, Elliot is even cooler, so just what is she unhappy with exactly? She guesses maybe it is because she is just used to being chased around a bit by good-looking guys or something. Well, even so, ever since that woman went to the dungeon and started wearing lighter clothing, her assets are standing out even more than before. She convinces herself it cannot just be the lack of a corset that's doing that. That waist of hers is ridiculous, and for her chest, she wonders if she's not stuffing pads in there. And those legs of hers are so long, even when she's not wearing heels. It dawns on her that she has got a face that can compete with hers and that bombshell of a body. What's more is that she's a duke's daughter and clever to boot. The king and queen seem to like her too, and she always deals with whatever Elliot tries with easy composure. Margaret lifts her chin toward the altar, jabbing an accusing finger at the heavens. She declares that Rachel, born into privilege, blessed with wit and fortune, is nothing but proof of God's blatant favoritism. Shouldn't it be his duty to spread blessings evenly, rather than heap them upon the nobles? Her steps begin to pace the chapel floor, her voice dropping to a mutter. Perhaps she has been thinking of it the wrong way. Rachel isn't merely fortunate, she has been drowning in blessings from the start, and she doesn't stand at the very top of the aristocracy, those around her certainly do. Isn't that, in itself, impressive enough? Then again, what truly separates their blessings from others? Margaret halts mid-step, the thought striking her like a revelation. It must be this. There is no other answer. She points again, more sharply than before, accusing him of being interested in a girl's appearance. He gave both Rachel and her good fortune since they both have beautiful faces, but because Rachel happens to be a bit cavia, he is playing favorites. She starts jumping like a child on the floor, saying now it is all adding up. It's all because of God playing favorites that she hasn't been able to rise above Rachel no matter how much time passes. She jumps about the chapel floor like an unruly child, shouting that it all makes sense now. God has been playing favorites, keeping her beneath Rachel no matter what she does. Outside, the priests frown at the strange cries echoing through the chapel, one muttering if perhaps a stray cat in heat has slipped inside. Moments later, Margaret bursts out, glaring at them and screaming, "God is dead." Meanwhile, Rachel sits back in her chair, listening as the maid delivers a full report on Punching Bag, otherwise known as Margaret Poisson, her entire history and character laid bare. Rachel muses that is the kind of person she is. The maid explains that Margaret is remarkably talkative. The investigator needed only 3 days to gather the information, most of it pouring from Margaret's own mouth. She even seemed content just to have someone to confide in, though the investigator was hardly moved to tears by her tales. Still, Margaret hardly appears the type to find much use for her head. Rachel's expression shifts as her senses sharpen. She raises a hand, silencing the maid. A moment later Martina steps into the dungeon, smiling as she greets her with a light, "Long time no see." She admits she had meant to meet with Rachel and Alexandra earlier but arrived too late, so she came straight here without stopping at home. Rachel beams and asks if she would like a cup of tea before hearing everything that has been happening. Meanwhile, the prince declares they are going to royally ruin Rachel's day. Rachel peeks through the window bars and calls to Skies, who crouches in front of her, asking what's wrong. She admits she needs to apologize for earlier and explains that, with so much free time, she has been writing letters to friends and accidentally mentioned Margaret to Martina. Skies flinches and asks if Martina knows about Margaret. Rachel nods playfully, adding that she even visited her in jail the night before. Skies bolts instantly, and the prince, watching, spins to Rachel and snaps, "What the hell did she do?" She looks at him innocently and says the main contents of her letter were about Margaret being locked up after her broken engagement, but for some reason Martina seemed only interested in how well Skies and Margaret were getting along. The prince snaps at her, Isn't it obvious?" before turning to his knights and instructing them to return to the palace right away as Skies is in mortal danger. His father sits in his study, looking up at the sudden commotion. Suddenly, the door bursts open and Skies storms in, hand already outstretched, shouting, "Daddy, give me money." His father looks embarrassed on his behalf before muttering if he ever wants to become a true knight someday, he should think twice about bursting into a meeting to ask his father for money in public. His father stands up, asking in a stunned voice if he's listening, and tells him this wouldn't even be fine under normal circumstances. But now with the matter about Lady Ferguson, he is well aware of what people are saying about his failure to admonish His Highness, is he not? And now he hears that despite being engaged, he's flirting with His Highness' lover. Anyone with an iota of common sense wouldn't give his absent request the time of day. His father narrows his eyes, asking if he needs it to buy Miss Poisson a present. If he feels that sort of obligation, it would be better served buying such a thing for Martina. Skies blurts that same Martina coming right now because of Miss Rachel's letter and tells him he can scold him all he likes later, but first he needs some getaway money. He doesn't have to repeat his father orders to assemble the knights and bring all the heavy armor they have and to mobilize troops from the capital's garrisons and have them form a pair immediately. If their defenses are breached, they may be able to buy time by using siege equipment and tower shield formations. He tells his son to take the fastest horse in the stable and flee to the northern garrison, pointing to a pouch of money and instructing him to take it, while the son bows, apologizing and promising they'll meet again if they survive. Just then, Martina strolls in without greeting, saying, if he knew she was coming, then just where is he rushing off to? He pales at her smirk, realizing she's really here and stammers about the troops in the Eastern Commandery. Martina waves him off, explaining that when she announced she had to leave and come here, everyone tried to stop her, but after persuading 20 of them herself with her bare hands, they finally let her go, though their debate took longer than she expected. His father warns that she is a knight and leaving her post without permission is going too far, but Martina glares and screams that he might not know anything, calling him a wrinkled old fool. The rumors say Skies was cheating on her, and who cares about protecting the country at a time like this? Her father shoots back that the country comes first, but she snaps that the only reason she became a knight was to protect Skies, replacing "for king and country" in her vows with "for my dearest Skies." He mutters that it's the last thing a knight should ever say, and as the guards attack from behind, she handles them without even looking back. The other guards watch in shock, one remarking what inhuman speed, and she even managed to cave in their breastplates. The other comments, just as always, she is something else when it comes to Skies. Skies overhears them saying about how they were thinking that maybe she would cool off a little after spending some time on the frontier. If anything, didn't she get worse because she couldn't see him? One knight suggests he should just get married already, and before Skies can stop himself, he snaps, maybe he should marry her himself, quickly covering his mouth in shock at what he said. She freezes for a moment, then quietly says they are close, aren't they? If there's something about her he's unhappy with, saying she'll listen and wants them to always be honest. Pale, he slowly begins to reply, the truth is, but she delivers a sharp kick, cutting him off. No, she doesn't want to hear that, refusing to let him speak. Looking down at him sprawled on the floor, she rages about how she's heard that lately some sow called Margaret has been throwing herself at him. She says she is the only one he is going to marry, right? He is not going to be some kind of pig herder, right? He stammers, of course, but she grabs him by the collar, shaking him, demanding he not lie, insisting she knows exactly how much he's been fawning over Margaret, having heard everything yesterday. She grits out that if he has any idea how much she thought about him while at her post. He is the only one she has ever loved, so why is he looking at other women? She hisses he might be in pain now, but it's not a thing compared to the pain in her heart. Suddenly her eyes flash with manic determination and she declares the only reason he was able to cheat in the first place is because there are other women in this world, isn't it right? Though she is not capable of killing every other woman in this world, what if they go to heaven hand in hand, that way no one can disturb them? How about just the two of them together forever? Now I understand why he was running for his life like a maniac. Skies screams for his men to intervene, but before anyone can act, Margaret storms in, shouting that they must stop fighting over her. Sky's father quickly tells her to flee, warning that Martina has already gone and there is no stopping her now. Suddenly Martina stills, quietly saying so she is the dog in heat, the disgusting sow, the thieving cat, the one-woman breeding show. Raising her sword at her, she smirks evilly, declaring she is Sky's fiancée, Martina. And then she lunges at her, saying that for the sake of all the awful things she undoubtedly forced poor Skies to suffer through, she will take her head. Margaret barely reacts before she is grabbed by Highness, who barely makes it in time and pulls her to the floor. Margaret, on the floor, blurts that doesn't she know that it is dangerous to swing a sharp thing like that around? Martina sneers, saying she intends to spill noble blood, aiming her blade again, claiming the world is full of loose witches casting lustful eyes on Skies. Her only solution, she declares, is for Skies and herself to live happily ever after in heaven, and no filthy thing like Margaret can follow them there. She lunges again, but this time Margaret bolts. While Elliot lies on the floor, Wolinski remarks on the excellent display because of her gallantry. Miss Margaret is able to get a head start. On the other hand, Margaret runs for her dear life as Martina chases her like a maniac. On the other hand, the Archduke asks the Prime Minister what he thinks of this newly crafted masterpiece that he ordered from a talented young prodigy of a ceramist. He watches along the hallway, admitting that to put such a shade on that glaze, alongside that gradient, truly the boldness of youth is on display, an enchanting piece. The Archduke admires it, proud to have acquired it and wanting to leave it for future generations to clamor over the privilege of beholding it. Suddenly Margaret comes running and picks up that piece, throwing it at Martina. It shatters into pieces. The poor Archduke says that when he was saying he wanted future generations to clamor over it, he didn't quite mean literally. Margaret tries opening the door and wonders why it is not opening. There is no way to escape from here, and she cannot get away. Unbeknownst to Margaret, this wasn't the first time the people of the royal palace had come up against the horror Martina could unleash when Skies was involved. These veterans had all holed themselves up in their rooms, throwing themselves against the door and trembling in fervent prayer that it wouldn't open. She races down the corridor and hits a dead end, skidding to a stop. No time to think, she remembers the fountain just beyond this spot in the garden. With a running leap, she dives in, water exploding around her. As she surfaces and scrambles out, her eyes lock onto the figure on the ground, Martina, fully armored, glaring daggers at her. She scrambles out of the fountain and flattens herself against the ground, realizing now her days are numbered. Under normal circumstances, Martina's torment on Skies would earn her a spot in jail, right alongside Rachel. However, since it was Sky's fault in the first place for causing his fiancée to fly into a rage, it was decided to leave it aside as a case of domestic violence. But even putting her battery charge against Skies aside, the potential charges against her listed as follows: endangerment of life, beating comrades in arms, trespassing upon the royal palace, cursing out a superior officer, violating an oath, vandalism, interfering with public officials, carrying out their duties, lèse-majesté against the Archduke, attempted assassination of a baron's daughter. There were enough crimes on her rap sheet to put her away for 3 consecutive flight terms, but when it came to that love-addled girl, neither the Archduke, the ministers, nor any of the knights under their command had any intention of crossing Martina. So before anyone knew it, the whole affair had effectively been swept under the rug. A few days later, Sky sits quietly, bandaged from head to toe, while she rests in his arms. She tilts her head, her voice soft and sweet, and asks if he loves her. He murmurs yes, of course. She pokes his cheek playfully, pondering what dress she should wear for their wedding. Hesitant, she asks if he thinks a mermaid-style gown would suit her. He replies once again yeah, of course. Later, a senior knight suggests that keeping them away from the royal palace must take priority over everything else. He proposes letting Skies and Martina have their honeymoon in a remote region, allowing them to play at being newlyweds. Even if things go wrong there, at worst they might lose only half of an outpost fortification. Sky's father nods, admitting the reason he had originally assigned Martina to the border was that the girl was becoming far too reliant on Skies. Perhaps, he adds, this situation might also serve to forge Skies into a stronger man. But Miss Ferguson is connected to this case as well, isn't she? He asks. The knight confirms that the lady has admitted as much. She was the one who informed Martina in a letter. Sky's father asks so she moved to eliminate Skies. Telling Martina about Miss Poisson was surefire bet towards that aim. She didn't do anything expressly illegal, but she is without doubt the cause of this incident. He can only hope His Majesty can return soon, otherwise he fears that should Miss Ferguson's machinations escalate further, the entire palace may be brought to ruin. His Majesty, dressed in his spring attire, tells the messenger standing before him that he will have to get used to seeing him in his hot spring clothes. The messenger reports that every ministry and department has submitted separate petitions, but broadly speaking, many dissenting voices express concern over Prince Elliot's handling of political affairs, particularly regarding the arbitrary and one-sided annulment of his engagement to Miss Rachel Ferguson, daughter of Duke Ferguson. The king asks if the messenger can summarize the rest. "Hurry up and come back," would be the summary, sire, the messenger replies. The king sighs. Indeed, he would like to return to the capital post-haste, but the pain in the small of his back still grieves him. The messenger hands him a letter from the palace caretaker, the Archduke. The king opens it quickly as it is from his uncle, who writes that all of this is bad for his heart, that he feels one step from the grave, and urges the king to hurry back. The king promises to do his best and instructs the messenger to deliver his reply, also expressing concern over the state of the capital, though the pain in his shoulder continues to grieve him. Returning to the queen, he tells her it is just a constant slew of nagging for him to come back, and he has told them time and time again that he needs to stay in the hot springs until the pains in his feet stop giving him grief. Settling into his seat, next to the Duke Ferguson, he mutters in disbelief at the pile of documents before him. How are all his countries and ministers losing to a girl locked in a dungeon when it comes to both volume and quality of reports? Truthfully, there are only 2 points of import here. The first is that Elliot has been focusing all of his attention on tormenting Miss Rachel, whom he himself put in jail, leaving governmental affairs to fester under his watch. The second is the political turmoil that Elliot has unearthed in his decision to renounce his engagement in the first place. This kind of uproar leaves him with little choice but to return quickly. He lets out a low grumble, remarking that although everyone wished him well when he left, assuring him they would handle things in his absence, this turmoil still feels strangely irregular. Turning to the Duke, he asks if there might not be someone capable of bringing the situation under control. The Duke explains that just last night was the first time he delivered a missive from her, and while he doesn't wish to reveal too much about his shadowy courier service, he notes the efficiency of her work. The girl, smiling until now, pauses and requests that at least the latest reports be left on his desk. Finding stacks of papers on his bedside table while he sleeps does no favors for his heart. As the Queen reviews Rachel's reports, she remarks that Rachel is truly the only candidate she can consider for the next queen. The reports are rich, comprehensive, and concise, illustrating events with clarity. Her talent in subtly portraying powerful opponents in an unflattering light is exceptional, as is her ability to predict their moves while keeping her own countermeasures hidden. The Queen recalls being stunned when Rachel had pelted Elliot with stones at the pond, yet she narrated the story calmly and explained her actions with poise. The king observes that perhaps it was because she was not his child that Rachel appears so talented, steadfast, and in complete control, a presence capable of swaying subjects and influencing a nation. The Duchess interjects, however, warning that under the current circumstances, there's no way Rachel and His Highness could possibly sustain a marriage. Even if they resisted, it would likely not last beyond a year. The king declares that all they need is to rein in Elliot and place his second son, Raymond, in the care of the crown prince. While he would have preferred to reason with Elliot, if the prince is truly guilty of everything he appears to be, there is no hope for him. Still, any plan of this sort must be executed quickly. Leaving a power vacuum is unwise. The Queen agrees, noting that their 2-month hot spring vacation is coming to an end. The king remarks they have spent their days leisurely, rotating between baths, meals, and naps. The Queen adds all those lovely and quaint handheld foods that one would never be able to enjoy back at the palace. And the Duchess says not having to constantly worry about how they come across like in high society. While the Duke sighs and says no subordinates to jostle him with exhortations to work, no political enemies with their barely disguised jibes. They all say in unison that they do not want to return home. A maid arrives to visit Rachel in the prison. Rachel recalls there was not a scheduled report today and asks what's the matter. The maid explains that Lisa, stationed in Count Fracker's territory, sent an urgent message. Their Majesties and Master and Madam will be returning to the capital soon. Rachel says this covers only the first part of the report. And the rest? She asks. The maid continues that their Majesties intend to replace Prince Elliot with Prince Raymond as Crown Prince. Rachel blinks innocently, her expression light, and murmurs, wondering just what His Highness could have done to deserve it. She can't help but feel a little bad that her vacation is ending after only 3 months. The maid comments wryly that most people who take 3 months off are lucky to have a job to return to at all, which only makes Rachel happier. But the maid lets her know, considering the political value of the position, it is highly doubtful that she will be fired from her role of being a duke's daughter, but Rachel wants a moment to fantasize about it. Meanwhile, Martina calls out to Prince Elliot with a cheery tone, saying it's been a while. A book in her hand, but then her smile slips. She points out it's written in here that His Highness is after her skies. Despite how much he clearly hates it, it says he ravishes him. She leans closer, asking, "Is it true?" Elliot trembles. "What book is that?" He doesn't know anything. There's no saving Prince Elliot now. And that concludes the video today. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want another part.